Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the ceasefire in Gaza that's been brokered. With us to talk about it from his home constituency in Luxor, Egypt, Member of Parliament Abdul Mawgoud Dardari of the Freedom and Justice Party. Also with us from Washington, Barbara Slavin of the Atlantic Council. And here in the studio, we're joined by Stephen Ekovich of the American University of Paris and Gérald Olivier of news website atlantico.fr. Even though the public pronouncements out of Washington in the past week since military operations once again were unequivocally backing Israel's right to defend itself, Ann Guerin in the Washington Post highlights an ulterior motive to the trip. The administration knows that with Clinton on the ground trying to resolve the crisis, it will be harder for Netanyahu to make good on his threat to invade Gaza. Let's go to Tel Aviv now and join France 24's Chris Moore. Tel Aviv, which bore witness to the first bomb blast of its kind since 2006. 24 injured, 3 of them seriously. Chris Moore, what is the general mood where you are? Are people relieved, or were they angling for a fight with Gaza?
We've been covering this conflict for a week or so now from the Israeli side. All you hear on the Israeli side, and you hear it more vehemently the closer you go to the Gazan border, is that they want that rocket fire to stop. You were asking about the situation in Tel Aviv. Yes, there was a bomb blast today, no fatalities. Obviously, Israelis have dealt with the threat of bombs in the past. It was a painful memory for some, memories of the Intifada. Going forward, obviously, this ceasefire has been declared. The feeling you get is one of relief. People here wanted those rockets to stop. Depending on their political views, they saw that the only way to do that was a prolonged and brutal military campaign, or indeed to declare a ceasefire and regard the military operation as something of a success. Although, as I speak now, there are still rockets coming over into southern Israel before that ceasefire comes into effect. I think, as on the Palestinian side, there's probably a degree of cynicism here. Let's face it, since Hamas took over in 2007, the Israelis and Hamas have been in a constant state of war, if you like, which escalates and de-escalates. People are going to be looking for some real progress coming out of what at the moment is a fairly basic ceasefire. On the Israeli side, people tend to look at things purely from a security point of view. If you like, they want those rockets to stop. They want to live in peace. On the Palestinian side, there are obviously much longer standing and much deeper grievances, and they're hoping for progress on them, as will be the Israelis on the security front.
All right, Chris Moore, thanks for that update from Tel Aviv. No firm confirmation on who attacked that bus, by the way, but it did coincide with a bold statement on the website of Iran's parliament. Ali Larijani, the speaker, saying, "We are proud to defend the people of Palestine and Hamas, and that our assistance to them has been both financial and military." That statement coming out of Tehran. Barbara Slavin, lots at stake in this conflict. There's lots of players, and certainly a lot at stake for Tehran.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think they wanted to change the subject from their own nuclear program. They wanted to change the subject from the civil war in Syria, where, of course, Iran is supporting the unpopular side, at least in terms of the Sunni Arab world, the government of Bashar al-Assad. So the Iranians have been crowing for a few days, but the question is whether this has gone on long enough for them to make their propaganda point. Hamas, as you know, has distanced itself in some ways from Iran because of the Syria crisis. And while it still may be obtaining rockets from Iran, it's not clear that there's any kind of political coordination that is going on between Hamas and Iran. In fact, the coordination, if there is any, is with certainly with Egypt, with Turkey, with Qatar, which are fellow Sunni powers and ones that Hamas feels much more comfortable with these days.
All right, no coordination, but we've seen those longer-range rockets that are supposedly Iranian-made.
Yeah, I mean, those have been smuggled apparently from Sudan. There was an Israeli attack on Sudan a few weeks back that was meant to hit that supply line. But just obtaining weapons doesn't necessarily mean support. I mean, you may remember the Karine A situation back in 2001 when the Israelis intercepted a shipment of weapons that were meant for Fatah, for the PLO, coming from Iran. And Iran, historically, at least at that time, was closer to Hamas, was closer to Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It's a group that Iran has supported. So, you know, this is a bit murky. I mean, in the sense that Hamas will take the weapons wherever it can get it, the PLO in those days also. But that doesn't mean that there's political coordination between the leadership of Hamas and the leadership in Tehran.
Gérald Olivier, do you agree?
Yes, actually, I do agree. Simply because Iran's goal in the region is just to spread destabilization. Its goal is to maintain a certain form of havoc, which one way or another, and to also, just like Barbara said, keep attention away from its own nuclear program. So this Gaza war, if we're going to call it this way, actually started in Sudan back on October 23rd, when the Israelis bombed that facility which was housing all those rockets. And the issue is really the smuggling from Iran. So even though it was Hamas against Israel, it was really Israel talking to Iran, and we could see, if things had gotten worse, the first step of a larger regional war or regional destabilization. That is why it is so important that the U.S. is involved.
All right, and speaking of proxies, and this is the interesting point, is what's going on north of the border of Israel. Now, earlier, the Lebanese prime minister here in Paris publicly rooting for an active role for Washington in brokering a lasting solution. Najib Mikati speaking to France 24's Mark Perlman.
So what we are looking and what we are betting for the next mandate of Mr. Obama, that really we will have a kind of, I can say, imposing a peace on all parties in the region. And here the role, the primary role of the Arab states to work, to help and to assist this administration to achieve a good, peaceful solution.
So Mikati calling for Obama to impose a peace, but he's the head of a coalition that includes the Iranian-backed Hezbollah movement. Hassan Nasrallah, its leader, not at all on the same page. On Tuesday, he encouraged fighting, not negotiations. What is asked from the Arab countries is to help and arm Gaza rather than working as mediators between the Palestinians and the Israeli enemy. So what's going on at in Gaza obviously affects the whole region.
First of all, I don't think that the United States or President Obama can impose a peace. There's a misconception in the region that since the United States is a superpower and has a lot of power, therefore superpowers can impose peace, especially on their allies, Israel. Israel, it is an ally, but it's not an easy ally. It's a difficult ally. So I think we should just put aside this idea that President Obama can impose a peace. And I'm not even sure that he wants to get involved a lot. I'm sure he would like to have some sort of lasting peace or some sort of enduring, at least in the short term, enduring calm in the region. That would, of course, be a very nice feather in his cap, as it were, for the president. But it's also very risky at the same time. So I'm not sure he wants to implicate himself too much, although the temptation to come up with some sort of a solution is probably very strong in the White House.
Barbara Slavin, you hear there the Lebanese prime minister calling on the American president to impose a peace. You heard Hillary Clinton saying that in the coming weeks, Washington's going to be working hard to do more than just this ceasefire. Do you think that Obama, after being burned once trying to broker a lasting solution, may suddenly feel emboldened?
I doubt it. And point of correction, I think someone said that he hadn't been involved for 4 years. Well, he was very involved for the first 2 years of his presidency, and as you point out, he got horribly burned. You know, the situation was worse than when he started, when he tried to get the Israelis to agree to a settlement freeze and was not successful. So, no, I think his priority actually is going to be Iran, and that will be interesting. If the United States and Iran are talking, can talk directly, they're going to talk about more, hopefully, than just the nuclear issue. They're going to talk about the whole regional situation. As I mentioned, this is a puzzle, and there are many pieces to it. So, yes, I think the U.S. will try to alleviate conditions for the people of Gaza, will probably provide yet more money for more iron domes and defensive equipment for the Israelis to shore that up. But I don't expect a big peace push. Netanyahu is going to be reelected most likely as prime minister in January, and he, at least so far, has not shown a willingness to really make concessions for peace. He has shown restraint in terms of slaughtering large numbers of Arabs, which is welcome, frankly, compared to his predecessor, but he has also not shown that he's willing to take risks for peace. So I would look for Obama to work on the Iran front, to work on non-proliferation issues, which are really close to his heart, and maybe that's the way he's going to look for a legacy. His major interest, of course, is to keep the United States out of a third regional war, because we desperately need that in order to get a budget deal, in order to reduce our budget deficit, which is his first priority.
You say that, yet it seems as though he has a card to play when it comes to Netanyahu at this particular point in time.
He has a card in the sense that he's able to urge restraint, I think, more effectively than perhaps in the past. After all, Netanyahu made no secret of the fact that he would have preferred Mitt Romney to be president. But still, the United States has a historic alliance with Israel, and that's not going to change. And given the bifurcated nature of the Palestinian body politic, as well as Netanyahu's resistance, I think it's very, very difficult to envision a peace negotiation right now.
But the situation itself in Israel requires restraint. It's not just President Obama who can try to encourage the Israeli Prime Minister to come to some restraint. First of all, he has his own election coming up. Plus, as we've already pointed out, the situation in the region is quite different. And I'm not sure that the same kind of intervention that we saw in the past is possible, although massing troops is a deterrent and is a message. But I think it's probably been there to push along the diplomacy, at least in the first instance.
We're getting word of a rocket fired from southern Lebanon towards Israel, that according to a Lebanese security official quoted by the French news agency AFP, just showing us how volatile it all is.
It is. One thing has changed, however, is that Obama has changed his tack. The problem with the first 2 years is that he started working on Israel as if Israel was the sole player or the sole issue, insisting on freezing those settlements. And now he has totally changed. And in this instance, for example, he insisted on Israel's right to defend itself. What is more important also to look at is the pressure that through Egypt he's able to put also on Hamas, because the issue here is that one side has not even been willing to recognize the legitimacy of the existence of the other. So we're not talking about peace. We're talking about a group here controlling an area, Gaza, whose purpose is to destroy its neighbors. So we are far from peace. And the reason Obama had so much trouble in the first 2 years of his first term was his position towards Israel. He's changed that all around, and I think that now we can expect, if they go back into it, another type of behavior that may yield other results.
Now, that's fascinating that you say that, because 48 hours ago we were discussing this very topic in this very studio. And then we had panelists who were saying, and I'll put this to you, Barbara Slavin, that it was Hamas that had leverage over Egypt at the time, because basically saying that if the Egyptians don't play hardball enough, well, they can send militants out into Tahrir Square to protest. Now that we have this ceasefire deal, I wonder who's got leverage over who when it comes to Egypt and Hamas.
Well, I think everybody has lots of cards to play, and unfortunately nobody's played them very well historically. Look, we don't know whether Hamas's entire arsenal of long-range rockets have been destroyed. I would presume that the Israelis are not agreeing to a ceasefire unless they have a good sense that they have destroyed most of those Fajr 5 rockets. So, you know, I think the Israelis have gotten a good bit out of this. Hamas has shown that they won't just sit there and take it, that they're an important player in the region. Egypt has shown its worth. The U.S. has also raised its head. But you know, it's so complicated. I don't see anybody in a position to really be able to resolve this at this point. You know, it's Israel mowing the grass, as they like to say every few years, but the grass keeps growing.
Israel mowing the grass every few years. In this case, though, when you look at the diplomatic activity, Stephen Ekovich, of the past week, you've seen the Qatari Prime Minister, the Turkish Prime Minister travel to Cairo. There was this sense that there was this sort of consensus that had to be built between various players affiliated to various degrees with the Muslim Brotherhood. In this case, though, at the end of the day, when you see the Iranians weighing in on the discussion, who can be the one to bring everyone to the table?
Well, all of this activity has been realpolitik. It's been to reestablish, in a sense, the status quo. Egypt has been playing realpolitik. What's changed, after all, with the foreign policy of Egypt? Egypt has been obliged to adapt to the situation in the region. So all of this activity is meant to bring some calm and to establish some sort of at least temporary stability. So.
I'm going to interrupt you because we're going to go to Israel and show you live images of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is addressing the press as we speak, making his first public statements since the announcement that ceasefire would be going into effect at 19 hours Universal Time. Israel, which is not reopening the border. At the end of the day, Barbara Slavin, something more concrete, more lasting, something that would perhaps ease the conditions of the blockade of Gaza and ensure lasting security for those in Israel who live near the border. Is that anywhere in the cards at this point?
Well, I hope so. I hope that the Egyptians have made some promises in terms of regulating the border. You know, the Israelis are also worried about the situation in Sinai. So perhaps there's some agreement that's been reached about increasing the Egyptian military presence to try to control the smuggling of weapons, to close some of those tunnels that remain open between Gaza and Egypt. I would assume that that's part of the agreement that's being reached.
All right, and we'll leave it there. Barbara Slavin, thanks for joining us from Washington. I want to thank Stephen Ekovich. I also want to thank Gérald Olivier.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.